Okay, call to order the April 25th, 2023 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Specific information on the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, in-person attendance of members of the public and board members will be permitted. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting live may do so on their television by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceeding as soon as possible after the meeting. If members of the public would like to participate in any public hearings but not attend the hearing or this meeting in person, please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting to Gene Enright at genright@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. Gene, could we take roll, please?
Yes. Kelly Cormier,
Here.
Sean Kevlin,
Here.
Eitan Goberg,
I'm here.
John Simons,
Here.
Peter Boynton.
Aye.
And Kelly is attending remotely for the record.
I'm sorry, Etan, just a couple of comments. You're the only person I can really hear. Jean was really, really muted, and there's no video coming across on cam.
Okay, give us 1 minute.
I'm sorry, so Kelly, did you say you could hear me but nobody else?
I can hear you and no one else, and there's no video coming across on cam.
Okay, give us a second, we're working on it. So everyone, if you could please bring your microphones closer to you when it is your turn to speak, that would be one way to do it. Why don't we do a little test of that, just to make sure.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me, Kelly?
I can, it's faint, but I can hear you.
Wow. Okay.
There we go, that worked, that did it.
Perfect.
Whatever you just did.
John, pull your microphone closer.
Jean, you're faint as well. It's different. Right? Etan's full on. I can hear him just fine.
Okay,
There you go, perfect.
all right. I pulled the microphone closer.
And now we're working on video. So we got audio down. Now we're going to work on video. All right, the first thing we're going to, there's a little bit we could do, I think, here without the need for seeing pictures. Request for special permit extension, 325 Johnson Street, Allison Sparks. Gene, can you tell us about this one?
Yep, so the special permit is due to expire on August 21, 2023. The project has not yet commenced, so there's been all kinds of cost escalations and other complexities since the special permit was issued, and so they're just requesting the 1-year extension.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the request for a 1-year extension for watershed special permit to 325 Johnson Street?
So moved.
Motion made. Can we get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Kelly?
Yes.
Special permit I'm not going to have you vote, Sean. John?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
And I vote yes. That's approved.
So 4-0.
Yes.
Okay.
Continued public hearing, 0 Turnpike Street, Middleton Farms LLC. Got
So this application opened early November 1st, actually, of 2022. They requested a continuance to May 23rd. I need to alert them that we don't have a meeting May 23rd. Our second meeting in May is May 16th, which is annual town meeting.
Which we're not
So our
gonna have.
next meeting is actually June 6th. However, I did alert the attorney for the project that a re-notification may be in order at this point. I mean, they've continued every meeting since November 1st. I do have one abutter that contacts me every meeting to confirm that they will or will they not be here. So I did put a call out to him today to make sure he knew that they wouldn't be here again tonight. So that will be at the board's discretion whether we want to renotice, and I can inform the attorney.
Yeah, I think definitely, it's very stale. I mean, you
Yeah.
could argue they should withdraw it.
Well, that's-
What are they waiting on?
So it's a joint application with the town of Middleton and North Andover. They're also under an enforcement order with the Conservation Commission. There was some clearing and grading done, so they've continually although they're addressing the enforcement order, they've continued with them to the same degree they've continued with you. The attorney indicated that they, through the holidays and whatnot, that they couldn't respond to peer reviews in that timeframe, and so they're still working on peer reviews. So we've had peer review comments from stormwater and traffic and civil that I have not received any responses to yet.
So here's my suggestion. I don't mind continuing hearings as long as we're getting information and making progress, but there's been no progress. And I feel like there's no information. And I know when we did have the first couple of hearings, we did have a lot of abutters here. So
Right.
I think, what did you say the date of the June meeting was?
June 6th.
So for June 6th, if they want to stay on and have the continued hearing, that they need to renotice. And they also need to come with additional information. If not, then at that June 6th, either we're going to ask them to withdraw it, or we're going to close the public hearing and vote on it, and then they can have a decision that's unfavorable. So they need to do something with it. So if that's withdrawing it, fine. If that's presenting evidence, fine. If you're going to present evidence, they need to renotice. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So let them know that.
Okay.
So we'll grant the continuance until June 6th, but that's what we'll be expecting.
So they've requested till May 23rd at this
Right.
point,
But there's no May 23rd.
but there's no meeting, so.
So we're
you'll
going to continue it until
Continue
June.
it to June 6th.
We're going to agree to continue it. It's going to continue till June 6th. But they need to know that either they need evidence and notice, or they need withdrawal, or we'll just close the hearing.
Yep.
And vote on it based on the information we have to date. Okay. Guys, if you could just, sorry, thanks. All right. New public hearing. Are you guys ready for the new public? Is the new public hearing ready?
They're here.
They're here? Okay. 189 Willow Street, Vincent Grasso, application for site plan review and corridor development, District 1, Development District, and Article 10, Administration of the North Andover zoning bylaw. The applicant proposes construction of a 7,776 square foot multi-tenant professional / business office and personal service building, along with parking, landscaping, and associated improvements. Project is located within the Corridor Development District 1, a CDD1 zoning district. Gene, if anyone's from the applicant, okay, good. We have a person. Gene, why don't you tell us about it, and then
Yep.
we'll go to the applicant.
So there is some history on this parcel, so I have a fairly lengthy staff report, but let me bring up the locus first. I think that is relevant.
Gina, I have all the links, everything from the agenda, but just as you're showing things, since I can't see the video, if you don't mind just kind of being a little more,
Specific,
pointing
yep.
out what page and things are on. Thank you.
Okay. So right now, Kelly, I'm displaying the locus, which is 189 Willow Street. You can see to the bottom right-hand corner of the locus is
Sorry,
Jasmine's Plaza. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, is there any way that we can have, no, so it's not, it's up here. Is this getting shown on cam?
Yes.
Okay, so Kelly, it's not coming through on the computer? Are you able to?
No, it's not, yeah, I'm on the Google Meet and it's not coming through, but I mean, if it's showing up on cam, I'm looking at all of the materials online, so I'm not missing out on anything.
Okay.
I would just ask if you're looking, whatever you're projecting, just give a page number and I can absolutely follow along and see it all.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, so I got the flat panel on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so bear with me a little bit because there's a little bit of history here. So the site is a 3.34 acre and is undeveloped parcel of land. In 2005, the site was granted a special permit to allow for construction of a proposed three-story office building, approximately 7,200 square feet, with the garage underneath to be used as the ground floor. The property was then zoned Business 4. It is now zoned CDD 1. Water and sewer stubs were installed to this vacant lot in October of 2008. A 2-inch copper line was installed for domestic water use. A 6-inch ductile iron line was installed for a fire sprinkler system. And a 6-inch PVC line was installed for future sewer connection. There is an existing access driveway constructed across the wetlands. The site topography is relatively flat with bordering vegetated wetlands surrounding a portion of upland that was previously disturbed under the aforementioned previous permits for the site. Portions of this area of disturbance, which is in the center of the lot, not really depicted here, have developed into an isolated vegetated wetland. Any work proposed within 100 feet of these wetlands is under Mass General Law and Conservation Commission's review. Although the application narrative indicates that a notice of intent has been filed with the Conservation Commission, the Conservation Administrator has informed me that it has not yet been filed. The proposed building will be located central to the site, with much of the property vegetation remaining, which will provide screening to the facility. Stormwater runoff from the proposed pavement areas will be collected by drainage system consisting of a sediment forebay, water quality swale, and extended detention basin. Note, the applicant's request the stormwater management peer review has not begun yet. The applicant indicated they wanted to get initial feedback from the Conservation Commission prior to commencing the review. An escrow account has been funded, though. So they've asked for waivers regarding the scale, regarding the landscape plan. We have a requirement for a landscape architect. The planting plan was prepared in conjunction with the wetland scientist and botanist. A provision for the grading and drainage plan. Per the applicant, the site is sufficiently described due to the minimal scope, with a single proposed site plan identifying grading, drainage, and utilities on a single sheet. The provision of site topography at 2-foot intervals. They're proposing 1-foot interval contours. Department review comments have been received from the fire department, police department, DPW operations, building, health, and conservation. Other than conservation indicating they need to come before them as well, no issues have been brought forward. So I apologize, I forget your first name. I think it's,
Angie, before we start, is this the property that was the Anilaro property?
I think it was Anna Laurel initially, and then Dr. Chatterjee.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So, and so this is a little deceiving because the center of this property is an isolated vegetated wetland. And then there's some upland, and then the bordering vegetated wetlands across the property lines. All right, was it Michael Lodgton? I forget your first name. I said it all? Like I said, it's
try not
somewhat
to
unique, so I wanted to provide some background.
No, I appreciate it. Hopefully I won't repeat too much. That's what already been said. My name is John Ogren. I'm with Hayes Engineering, and we represent the applicant, Vincent Grasso, for this property. Again, 189 Willow Street. It's located on Willow Street. It's basically kind of behind the plaza that has Dunkin' Donuts and Sinju along Route 114. The site is currently zoned Corridor Development District 1. As stated, the site currently is vacant and was permitted a 3-story building back in 2005, and utilities were brought into the site as part of the initial work. Work was stopped after removing the top soil, and then the site remained dormant. During this time, a small isolated wetland expanded into the depression where the earthwork occurred, and the site was mapped as in the flood zone. Map amendments on the flood zone identified the base flood elevation on abutting lots, indicating that portions of the site, the site still ends up being above that base flood elevation of 236.5. The use that's being proposed, the applicant's proposing to construct 7 tenant spaces for business and professional office space, with an option for a garage bay for interior storage or storefront glass in the bay, depending on the use. The footprint of the building that's being proposed is 7,776 square feet. Based on that size, the requirement would be 23 parking spaces. We're showing 24 parking spaces. The project is envisioned to be very similar to the commercial space at the corner of Route 114 and Sharpner's Pond Road in function and aesthetics, just to kind of give you an idea.
Wouldn't the parking spaces be dependent on the uses?
Yes. Yep.
So, some of the questions, is there any entrances or exit, is it all off of Willow Street or is anything off of 114?
I'm sorry, what?
How do you get into the property? Is it all off of Willow Street or is there?
Off of Willow. Yeah.
All.
There's one entrance off of Willow Street, and that, like I said, that entrance is being constructed. There's wetlands crossing there, and then the utilities were brought in that same area of that driveway opening.
And so, what are the proposed uses? And what are the proposed uses that you use to get the 24 parking spaces? Because one of the things that concerns me about just this as an overall, it's a good professional and multi-tenant in that area. I think that's a good area for that. I think that makes sense. But depending on what type of businesses there are, especially if, I think you said there's 7 of them, 24 parking spaces may not be enough if you have anything where there's going to be people with significant employees or people there for a long period of time. So I guess I'm just wondering what type are expected, and just if we're going to use that 24 or the 24 parking spaces, 23 calculation, then whatever you're using for that calculation, I think we'd have to condition that those be the types of businesses and uses that are allowed. So if you want to say 24 parking spaces, we can leave it at 24, but whatever is, those kind of businesses are going to be conditioned, and something else isn't going to be allowed unless there are more parking spaces, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah.
It's gonna be 4 businesses, not 7.
Okay, so I thought I heard 7, okay.
They did say 7.
Okay. Okay.
There's 5 garage doors, 2 of them are gonna be for my personal business.
When you call on, when you come up, can you come up?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. My
Vinny.
name's Vincent Grasso, I'm the property owner.
Okay.
All right, nice to meet you all. It's gonna be 4 separate businesses, they're all professional businesses.
What do
We're-
you mean by professional businesses? Like,
We have a licensed roofing contractor, which is me.
okay, yep,
Everything's stored indoors, nothing outdoors.
yeah,
We have a licensed HVAC contractor. Again, no storage outdoors. We have a licensed electrician. We have a licensed installation contractor. It's gonna be 4, like I said, 4 licensed professionals in the building with 0 exterior storage. And there's no room for exterior storage there anyway.
okay, so none of that is retail.
No retail.
Okay, right, so those are the things that I'm trying to figure out,
I
yeah.
would think that based on the number of bay doors, you're gonna put the trucks inside?
Yes, trucks inside at night. There's 3, 4 small businesses. So everyone wants their valuables indoors.
Yeah,
Even though it's North Andover, we still want them indoors. And that's their livelihood. It's gonna be, they're all 2 or 3 person companies we have proposed leases with. There's no retail, there's gonna be nothing there.
okay, so, I mean, those are the things, especially when we have to figure out parking.
Absolutely.
So that
No.
doesn't seem
And I
like.
didn't mean to speak out of turn.
No,
I
no,
just-
that's fine.
I
So that's
just-
not
I
a
heard
lot of.
7, I'm like, it's really 4, I mean, there's only 5 doors there, so.
Okay,
Vinny,
okay,
Vinny, can you,
I'll-
Vinny, can you repeat? So HVAC, roofing, what other?
an electrician.
Electrician?
Electrical and insulation.
Okay, so I need to have Paul Paquette confirm those are considered professional businesses?
Yes,
Our bylaw-
they're all licensed contractors.
Yeah, so our bylaw defines professional businesses as something different than those.
Right.
So he might consider this more of a contractor's yard.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
So-
right, but a contractor's yard would have more of
Outdoor
exterior
kind of things,
storage,
yep.
piles of asphalt, piles
Yep.
of gravel. We're just doing,
So his comments included in the packet were, I need to understand what these bay doors are for. And so I'm just going to go back to him,
just to
confirm
pull
this
the
use.
personal vehicles in, yeah.
Yep, so he needs to confirm the use, and based on the use, he needs to confirm the parking that's required.
Right,
That's
so it
all.
actually
And we can
may,
have that
it actually
discussion,
may
yeah.
be less
Might be
parking.
less.
It might be
I was gonna
less
say,
parking
yeah.
required under
Right, they'll
that.
consider the inside parking as one
Well,
stall.
because for your contractor yards, you don't have people coming to visit, whereas professional businesses, those are generally under our bylaw, accountants, lawyers, things like that. You
Understood.
have people coming in and out. So that's,
Right, but
that's
the
where the
verbiage
clarity.
contractor's yard
Yep, no, I,
insinuates a different,
right, I understand. I
development.
understand what you're trying to do. We just
Yeah.
need to make sure under the bylaw
Yeah.
what it is and what uses we get. Okay, understood, okay,
I'll
good.
sit down. If you have any questions, I'll be ready.
Okay, perfect. Back to you, sir.
Sorry.
Oh, that was good. That's what I need to know.
So, kind of just to wrap it up, this is, our application with the planning board is perfunctory at this time, as the threshold issues are currently with the Conservation Commission.
Are they, has anything been filed with them?
Well, as we stated, they wouldn't allow us to file until we filed with the planning board.
Okay, so they're not with the Conservation Commission yet. They're going to be filed with the Conservation, so you wanted a sense of what
We're going to
our
be.
thoughts, and now you're going to be filing
Now
with
we're going to be
Concom.
filing with, yeah, so.
Okay,
So basically, the requirements of the Conservation Commission, the local wetlands regulation could drastically alter the site plan as it's currently presented. So in order, and basically what I said before, in order to apply with the commission, it is required that we first file our application with this board.
okay.
It is for this reason that we would like to request a continuance to the board's second meeting in May, or the meeting.
So our second meeting in May, as you probably heard earlier, is actually at town meeting. We don't put anything on for that because we just
That
deal with the
one.
town meeting articles. So why don't we do that till June 3rd?
June 6th.
June 6th, the first meeting in June. Put you on for that.
All right. And, we'll obviously provide a letter of extension if that's required,
Nope.
as far as the time to act.
I'll send you the continuance form. You just need to sign it, and then I file it with the clerk. That's all.
Perfect. And I just wanted to let you know, we are in receipt of the comments from DPW, Board of Health, Conservation, Police, and Fire. Prior to the next hearing, we'll plan to discuss the fire department's comments with the fire safety officer. And
What abuts this property? Is it all businesses? Willows?
Shunju,
I get that plaza.
Willow Street,
Yeah.
on the inside of Willow Street, so it's the backside of Stop and Shop in Shunju. Are you familiar with Willow Street at all?
Mm-hmm.
So then you,
We've had other
Ethan,
projects.
I can't hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you step up, Mr. Grasso?
it's behind Stop and Shop in Shunju, if the rear of Stop and Shop in Shunju on your right-hand side, it's before you make that hard turn down Willow Street. So it touches 114, if you turn around, you can see the map. It touches 114, we have about 100 feet on 114, which is not developable.
So this is Billy Sweet, Chimney
Correct.
Sweet?
That's, we're on either side of the chimney sweep and, I think it's a pest control now, or actually, a single-family house, not a pest control.
To the
Yes.
left of that site, it's off this map, is Nadine Lane with residences.
Right, so there's a property to my left, and then it's Nadine Lane, which is about 1,000 yards away. I'm sorry?
Feet, right?
Yeah, 1,000, yeah, 1,000 feet, sorry.
Okay.
Say yards? My bad.
So there may be public comment.
I'm sorry.
There may be public comment if you want to entertain it.
Oh, yes. So yes. Okay. Great. Why don't we take any public comment? Yes.
Well,
Has any?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
first.
We'll do
Yeah.
questions first.
How big is the upland on this property? Just that, piece in the front, not the piece on Turnpike Street, but the piece in the front. I mean, where you're gonna build the building.
We have about an acre upland. If you were to walk the property, you would swear it was 3.3 acres upland.
Yeah,
There's very little, if any, standing water anywhere.
got, okay. And where on that upland is this isolated wetland? Is it right in the middle of it, or where?
You can see it plotted, if you look behind you, John, it's that little white spot in the middle. It was a depression because of the clearing before we purchased it, and it just kind of sank into a wetland area.
So it seems like basically they started to do construction, then stopped,
Yeah.
and
No, I'm
where
just
they
trying to
dug a
get
hole.
Some idea of, it's
it-
right in the middle, so obviously it's gonna be disturbed.
Yes. And it was in 2008 when the recession
Yeah.
hit, and so I
Yeah,
just
no,
assumed
I'm
they
not
pulled
having a
out and they
problem.
left.
Just if
Yeah.
it's there, it's obviously going to be impacted. I guess the other question, this is probably more Conservation Commission question, is the design you did, I assume, meets all of the setbacks under our wetland bylaw. I mean, they may disagree with where the delineation is or something like that, but at least, did you design it to be compliant?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, 100%.
okay.
Well, it's what, replication is needed, right?
Replication.
Replication is
With
needed.
replication, okay.
They're gonna. Yeah. I mean, if it's in the middle of the site, they're gonna need to
Well,
build there.
Oh,
and
yes,
then,
replication on
and replicate
that, on that
But I'm
Area is-
thinking more for that is that all the other things, like the setbacks of the sides and the,
Right.
where the permeable surface ends and that sort of stuff, yeah.
Okay. Great. Jean, did we have any public comment that came in via online or emails?
No.
You guys can have a seat for a second? Thank you.
No.
Is there anyone that wants to make a public comment? Ooh, look at that. Oh, we had someone. Yeah, come on up, sir.
I'm sorry, Eton, just to interrupt before that. As I mentioned, I can't see the room, and usually I can't see who's in the audience anyway. Is there any significant amount of people?
There are the two people who just spoke. There are two other individuals. It looks like they're here to talk about this one, and then town council.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, thank you. My name's Scott Hazier. My wife Linda and I own the property at 651 Turnpike Street, which is in a butter of the property being proposed to be built on. This property has been in my wife's family for 50 years. During that time, we've been quite familiar with the wetlands that surrounds the property and the water table that exists around our home. We have a sump pump that is operative in our home. It clicks on regularly every single day under normal conditions. When heavy rains occur or when there's a heavier melt of snow, our basement occasionally floods. This development will drastically change the wetlands table located adjacent to our home. It's akin to putting a brick on a sponge. The water will be displaced. It has to go somewhere. It's not just going to stay on that property. It will move out towards our home. You have a lot of runoff from a roof of the building, from a parking facility, a parking lot, the water will no longer be able to be absorbed by the wetlands, by the natural surrounding. It's just going to run off again towards somewhere. And then we have, what I saw, a drainage proposal that directly aims the water drainage at our property. For those reasons, the damage that will occur to our property, which is pretty much inevitable, we would be absolutely opposed to this development. And we hope that if this property was being, basically proposed in your yard, that I don't think you guys would want this to be done too. It's just not a good idea. It hasn't been built on for 50 years for a reason. The reason is it's in the wetlands. Thank you.
So, Gene, so you stated earlier that they asked not to do the stormwater until after going to Concom, is that right?
They wanted a sense from Concom before we began that review. They did fund the escrow account.
So that's fine. I would just ask in our, one, that be the issues raised of the abutting property and stormwater, both current conditions and impacts be addressed in your stormwater report, and that our peer reviewer be instructed to specifically look at that issue. So totally understand your comments, and we will continue to look at them as we get more information. We're just not in a position to say, yes, you're right, no, you're wrong, but we should examine those as we go along in the project. So
Thank you very
thank you for letting us
Thank you.
know, and we're going to continue it till June 3rd. You can obviously be here or watch or participate online, however you want, but we'll try to get that addressed as part of our consideration. So thank you for those comments. Okay, any other questions or comments from board members at this time? Okay. All right, so I would say do what you need to do with Concom. If for that June 6th, I keep saying June 3rd, if for June 6th you're not ready, that's fine. Just let us know, send in a note so that we know where you are and that we can alert at least the butters, hey, it's not going forward on that date, rather than coming in and asking for continuance on that date. So the week before or so, just let us know so people can check in, okay? Okay, continue on to June 6th. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Discussion item, 115 Dale Street, Nicholas DeSantis, request for watershed special permit waiver in order to construct a new 22 by 17-foot deck within the non-discharge buffer zone.
All right, so the property is located in the residential 1 zoning district and within the watershed protection district. The proposed deck is 22 feet by 17 feet. The wetlands are approximately 130, I'm sorry, my staff report says 30, but it's 130 feet away. The project does not require any vegetation removal or regrading. The project proposes 8 12-inch concrete footings to be installed 4 feet deep. If the waiver request is approved, the planning director will inspect erosion controls prior to construction activity and perform 2 site visits. So here's the property, and you can see kind of to the south of the rear property line, there's a intermittent stream.
Which part of Dale Street is that?
So this is where you turn off Salem onto the one-way section of Dale Street,
Oh, okay.
across from Behringer Place, just about.
Oh, yeah.
A little
Okay,
closer
now
to
I know
Salem Street
exactly
than
where it is.
Behringer.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought it was, I just wasn't sure.
So this is an intermittent stream, it's not considered riverfront, so the distance for conservation is 100, so they do not need to go before conservation. And it's a small deck adjacent to that kind of bump out there.
Is this replacing an existing deck?
No, it's a new deck.
Okay. So they have one deck,
They do not,
existing completed deck flooring, existing screened-in porch.
you see
Am I
a deck?
looking at the right thing?
so there's a screen and porch, and it's going to go to the left of that.
Okay, so it's going to attach to the screened-in
Yep.
porch?
I'll bring the plan up. So,
Sorry, Dean, what are you showing?
so I'm showing the 115_Dale_plans, revision 2, Monday, April 10, 2023.
We're looking at page 4 right now, Kelly, 4 of
So
5.
page 4, those are the 8 sonotubes. So there's the existing porch, and adjacent to that would be a new deck, 17 by 22 feet with 8 sonotubes.
Gene, is the whole lot in the watershed?
Yes, it
District?
is.
Okay.
Yep.
It's 700 feet from a stream to the west.
Sorry, I can't hear the comments.
It's 700 feet from a stream to the west of the house, and that stream drains into the lake.
Okay.
So jurisdiction non-discharge zone is 325 feet. So they're about 130 feet from a wetland. The non-discharge zone is really just about stormwater discharge, controlling it. And so it's a deck that will be pervious. They're not proposing any change to the surface under the deck.
And I see we do have our watershed, water testing data.
Yep.
Everything in that area is acceptable. Is that fair?
Yep, and erosion control would be required, and I would inspect it. The one thing I would advise, if you're going to approve this, as part of a condition of the decision, would be to include the deed restriction for fertilizers that we include in all watershed special permits.
Yep.
And so I would condition that, as well as erosion and 2 site visits by myself.
And did we ever come up with any, like, signing, or is there any to be used, like, during construction or something like that? Like, is there, I mean, just, that's when I worry the most about it, is like, hey, don't use fertilizer and don't put the wrong things in now, you know? I know we had talked about one point about signage in the watershed in general.
Yeah, so DPW has the signage entering watershed. We
Yeah,
came up with that last
right.
spring. By the time they were constructed and made and delivered, we were in snow season, so they didn't want to put it up while snow plowing operations are enforced. So
They're expecting
I
a
hope
late
it
snow.
should be any day. I have followed up with them a couple times, so they were waiting for spring. I can check with them one more time, but they have the signs. They've all been manufactured, and DPW has them.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Who can we ask for at DPW to go see the signs?
Once they're installed?
No, just to go down to DPW and say, hey, can I take a
John
look?
Borghese. That's who
Oh,
I've been
good.
dealing with.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Got a motion to approve the waiver of a watershed special permit for 115 Dale Street
I'll
As
make
co-
that motion as discussed
with,
tonight, and with the premise that the.
with the condition of a,
The conditions.
I couldn't hear the comments. Motion as discussed with what?
motion is made to approve the watershed special permit with the condition of a deed restriction as to fertilizer that we have in our watershed special permit that we generally grant.
Yeah, and the other conditions that Gina enumerated too.
Yep. Site visit and erosion control.
Okay, so a motion to approve with conditions made by Mr. Simons. Can we get a second?
Second?
Second. All in favor? Kelly?
Yes.
John?
Yes?
Peter?
Aye.
And I vote yes, that's approved. All right, draft planning board rules and regulations. All right, we have town council here. Thank you very much. One of you, if you could come up. Jean, why don't you give us a little introduction and then we'll talk.
Okay, so as you know, at the last meeting, you reviewed a draft of planning board rules and regulations. You had discussion. I've incorporated those discussion comments in a red line edit version that I provided to town council, Chris O'Connor. She submitted an opinion letter. I think I gave hard copies to everybody. Bonnie made copies. And so any questions you may have regarding that opinion letter, Chris will be happy to answer.
Okay,
Is that the letter to the planning board regarding rules and regulations, Jean?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
has everyone had a chance to read that?
Also in the packet are agenda discussion items since the beginning of 2020. So it just kind of has just a broad list of types of discussions that you've had with potential applicants or watersheds waiver requests like you had tonight, things like that.
I'm just gonna give everyone a chance just to refresh themselves.
Is your principal concern that it's arbitrary?
That's certainly one of them. These are always on, right?
Yeah, if you see the
Yes.
green light
Got
should
it.
be on.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess the question, I have a bunch of questions, but one of the questions I have is let's assume that it is arbitrary. For the sake of argument, I think we could talk about whether it is or not. But let's assume that it is. And let's assume that we arbitrarily make a decision to require someone, if they want to come for an informal discussion, to have to do notice of butters. I was trying to think of what harm or legally any harm that would come to the town from that. So that's my question. Let's assume it is arbitrary, right? And that we said, someone comes to us and says, I want to do a project, and I'm interested in coming to the board to do a discussion, not have a hearing, not a public hearing, but just to discuss it. And we say, okay, well, that seems like a pretty important thing. We want you to notice abutters. And they say, I don't really want to do that. Okay, so they still have the right to come and apply for a hearing and go through the hearing process for whatever, site plan review or special permit or whatever they have. I guess I was trying to figure out and I couldn't come up with, so I'd ask if you could kind of delineate what possible legal action we would subject ourselves to if we were arbitrary. Or in the alternative, if we said, something came to the chair and it was a small project, a watershed waiver of a watershed special permit, right? And we said, I said, no, I don't think that requires our whole notification. They came before the board, we discussed it, we granted them a watershed special permit, and their neighbor then came in and said, hey, I didn't get any notification of this. Well, now we don't notify them of it anyway. So does the fact that we have this procedure subject us to any legal harm? I couldn't think of it, but that was my big takeaway of if this is deemed to be arbitrary, or what consequences could that have?
So I guess I would frame it up a little bit different from, the standard isn't necessarily teed up as what is the legal harm that could come to us if we promulgate rules and regulations that are arbitrary. The way I would frame it up is that we have, as we know, an obligation to draft rules and regulations that are not arbitrary and that are clear and easy to understand for members of the general public, as well as for those that are going to be making use and coming before the board. In terms of the harm, you know, it can be things such as one applicant might be coming before the board and feel compelled to do all of the extra notice requirements and have that type of informal discussion. And then without any real sort of standards that people would be able to understand objectively, somebody else could have a project and they might feel that it, wasn't significant or is significant. And so it could lead to individuals feeling as though, because there'd be a lack of clarity as to what would trigger something being significant, it could lead to individuals feeling that there is some sort of disparate treatment as to, you know, whose project is deemed significant and whose project isn't deemed significant. The other thing that I would worry about a bit is whether it would lead to some sort of, you know, confusion with respect to members of the public or abutters. Do they need to go to a meeting? Is it discretionary? And then if they go to one, do we have to go to the next one? I think for board members and those that are, you know, in town, that administrators, these things are clear. But for members of the public, they're going to perhaps do this type of thing once, if at all. And so it's a bit more mysterious. And so there's those types of concerns as well. But I think that really the way I would focus on it is, what is our obligation? And our obligation is to not, you know, have rules and regulations that are arbitrary, that aren't, that don't have objective standards or measures that are understood, that can be understood and explained by others. So, you know, as I noted in the opinion, there were some things that there was just no way of, no objective standard for an applicant to truly understand what projects are going to be deemed significant and which projects wouldn't be deemed significant. And also, what exactly is the, what is the meaning of the informal meeting? As I understand it, you know, just from conversations that I've had with Jean and obviously the rules and regulations that you all have been working on, and in particular Jean, I think are a good start and will be helpful to have in place. But without those objective standards, I think it will lead to problems. There are some other issues as well that I pointed out, but
So, can I just a couple of points, and then I'll get to you, John. So right now, we don't have any rules and regulations. So,
Right.
So right now, there's no actual rules and regulations for.
well,
There's subdivision rules and regulations.
Okay.
And
There's
there's
subdivision rules and
stormwater
regulations.
management,
There's
erosion
stormwater
control.
rules and regulations, but there's no rules and regulations for how we run the board. It's really based on open meeting law and past practice, right? And so as part of past practice, we have discussion items. And that's why I actually asked Jean to put a list together of all our discussion items from the last 3+ years. And they run the gamut from minutia to the most significant projects that we have come before the town, right? So, I mean, we look at a common driveway or bond request. We have updates from different boards, such as the Master Plan Implementation Committee and water updates and things like that. We have, which are important. Those are at the top, right, Peter? We have waivers. We have zoning changes discussions. We have Avalon, which came multiple times, big project. We have the Main Street project. We also have, here I see Carterfield Road. That was someone wanted to put in a playground. I remember that because it was someone I know. Glenny Woodlot, gravel parking lot. We have our own bylaws that we've discussed and had discussion items on. We've had,
Did you mention Royal Crest?
yes, I think I said Avalon, but
Oh,
Royal
okay.
Crest, yes,
Sorry, yeah.
right. So it runs the gamut, but I think it's, I don't know, going through the list, I think it's pretty clear which are the ones that would be significant and which are the ones that are not. So I think it's pretty clear. But I agree that there are no objective standards. But the thing that I keep coming back to is right now, for discussion items, we're under no obligation to put any particular discussion item on an agenda. So what happens is someone comes to Jean and says, hey, I want to talk to the board. Can we talk about this? Sometimes she'll just put it on the agenda. Sometimes she and I will talk and say, hey, is this appropriate as a discussion item? And we'll either put it on or not put it on, or talk to the applicant and say, hey, it might be better as, as a modification, or it might be better as a waiver request, or whatever. So we talk about it and we decide to put it on, but we're under no obligation to put any particular discussion item on the agenda. The only things we're really obligated to put on are when someone's actually made a filing. These are by definition not filing. So these are discussion items that are not actually anything that's being filed as an application, at least not yet. So I think that's important. We don't have rules and regulations. So what we're doing is actually trying to bring more clarity and actual objective list of rules. And so I just find it hard to kind of wrap my head around that we shouldn't do something because it's not objective enough when we have literally no objective standards right now. And the complaints we're getting are that people aren't being notified and haven't heard. So it wouldn't be perfect, and someone might say, I should have gotten notice, or I shouldn't, but right now we're getting that anyway, and now we're at least putting something in place that maybe needs to be massaged and changed over the years as we work with it. I just find it hard to kind of come to grips with, we shouldn't do something just because there may be some problems with it and it's not perfect.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure, unless John,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
And just by way of background, part of what I think we're trying to remedy here is, first off, we only have these informal discussions where there's a big project.
No, well, we have lots of informal discussions that,
Oh, but some don't lead to a public hearing.
correct.
Right.
Very many don't.
Right, so what we're talking about is large projects that end up with public hearings. We notice the public hearings, and without exception, members of the public, once they come, they kind of get the idea that they're the only ones who are left out of the loop. And they're right, because with these large projects, we've been meeting with developers often for months with informal meetings, which are very well intended. It's to give us a sense of, what are you thinking about? And to give the applicant a sense of, well, how are we reacting? But the problem is we're benefiting from all of that interaction with these informal meetings that are very well intended, for which there are no rules except past practice. And then the public comes in noticed for the public hearing, and it's like they're whiplashed. Like we're talking like we know all about this, and we do, and they don't. And so it's kind of dawned on us that we really ought to give the public an opportunity to know we're going to start talking about this. It's not a public hearing, it's an informal meeting, but we're going to make sure you know about it because you may want to come here. And I think there's also benefits to the applicant, because during those informal discussions, sometimes the applicant's sort of informal plans change. They might want something that's really, really big, and as a result of discussions, they kind of get the idea, geez, maybe that's too big. We're going to scale this down. But the public has no opportunity to be notified to be part of those discussions. And if the public is notified and they're here, they have a chance to get some ownership of, oh, okay, they're scaling this down. That's good. if that's an issue. And right now, we're just missing that interaction. So informal meetings, they seem to serve a pretty good purpose for everyone, but we ought to let people know.
I guess the comment I would make, first of all, since I was not at the last meeting, I missed a give and take. But I think we're talking about two things that are related, but at some level are distinct. Is it good to have discussions? Do we want to encourage discussions? And then, should we notice them or not? And I think they're sort of separate issues a little bit. I mean, because there's always, in terms of whether you decide to put a discussion on the agenda or not, it's inherently, there's an inherent amount of subjectivity in that. I mean, you just talked about certain things should go to the meeting, certain things should not. I mean, Gene, you talk to people all the time, and if you start making that crazy, should the public be invited to your private conversations in the office with, I mean, you can go insane about that sort of stuff, so we gotta use a little bit of common sense. But, I think we could take a position that we encourage discussions, but we're not going to force a notice, but we should request of the developer or the person promoting it that maybe it would be a good idea to notice people. Or, by the way, we know where this is, we're going to do it ourselves, I guess, and just tell people that this is happening. As opposed to the way we've done it. I just think that would be a cleaner way to do it.
So, John, can I just, so to clarify, so I agree about, I think discussions are worthwhile. I mean, obviously, based on the topic, but especially what we're really trying to get at are significant, impactful projects.
Right.
And so, and I think the discussions we've had, like, I actually think the discussion, let's just take the Second and Main. I actually think the initial discussion that we had was beneficial. The plan got reduced, they came back with better plans, and when they came back, I think they were really ready with a good plan. And that one, it got adjusted, it got changed, but I think the initial discussion we had was a good one. But I think it would have even been better if there had been more people coming at the beginning, potentially.
I don't quite as much agree with that, because I think it's a canard that people use, that they weren't informed when they're against something. That is always the first thing that they say, I wasn't told. Well, now you're told and now you know. I mean, a lot of those people just didn't want anything, and no matter how much information you gave them, they weren't going to change their mind. Now, fair enough, Peter, I think your point is fair, that they are coming in and we're like wired on the project, and they're not. There's an element there. I think that's, it's a certain bias that we may have, and we have to be concerned. Yeah, it's a cognitive.
But
yeah,
John,
that
isn't there another potential benefit here, that to use the project that Eitan just referenced, that during those informal discussions, they reduce the size based on the informal discussions. If the public, some of the public were here for that discussion, I would think that there would be some benefit for them to have been in the room when, as a result of the discussion, it was reduced. Kind of like, okay, it's not as small as I want, but geez, I didn't realize that this process worked at all for our interest, and son of a gun,
But
here it did. So I don't think it's 100% a
I
canard.
agree, but it seems to me that what we could have done, hypothetically, is, okay, we're having this discussion, you could go back to John and say, John, why don't you, notify a couple of the neighbors that we're gonna talk about this tonight? Just sort of as a voluntary sort of thing. I mean, because.
I think you make a good point as to what should the mechanism be? Should it be mandatory?
I'm sorry, I
Should it
can't
be-
hear the conversation right now.
What should the mechanism be? Should it be mandatory, voluntary? Should we do it? I don't object to having, the discussion on how we go about doing it, although I would say this, I mean, do you think if we say, hey, you really should notify abutters, for an informal discussion that all of the applicants are going to say, oh, yeah, we really want to do that. We're going to go ahead and do that.
No, they're not. I mean, but there also was the point, I mean, I know we went back and forth on that with John Smolak, and his point was that if you force it too much, you'll get less of it, or it'll go more underground. I mean, I think that's an entirely legitimate thing. Again, how much transparency do you want to have? How do you want to handle it? I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I guess I'm trying to figure out, based on the objective of what we want to do, how would you recraft it? Because I think we have a general idea of what we want to do. We just maybe inelegantly laid it out, I guess.
One other point I just want to add before we get to town council is that in thinking about it and actually in hearing what town council had to say, one of the things that I'm a little concerned about in our wording is we talk about significant projects. Now, there are other significant items that come before us, such as like inclusionary zoning, right? That's significant, but it affects the whole town.
Yep.
And it is a public hearing, but it doesn't have the same notices because we wouldn't notice all abutters, right? There are no abutters. So that is a significant topic, but it's not something that we would do a notification for.
It's a good point.
So we need to, we'd probably need to clarify
Yeah.
that, I mean, it really is, to Peter, your point earlier, it really is these projects that are going to be public hearings and that are going to be these things, just how do we get people more involved earlier? I think that's really that's not even necessarily at our meeting for the informal discussion. How do we get people involved earlier so that they know about it, so that they can contribute? And also, John, to your point, so that there isn't this big crow of, hey, no one got noticed. Because if we did notify people earlier, and then there was a public hearing, it's a lot harder for me to really credibly say, okay, did you not get noticed, or did you choose not to get noticed, So I think there is a benefit to the board in that too, but I think the goal of overall transparency and getting more people involved earlier on in significant projects, however we define that, or however objective we want to get on that, and we could add things, but I think, to me, it's more the, Oliver Wendell Holmes will know it when we see it, and I think we do, and I think really it's like a once a year kind of thing, and hopefully slowing down at some point, Gene, to lessen that, but that's what I think.
Another thing is, like, Gene, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but people come in and talk to you all the time about zoning, and can I do this, and can I do that, and what will the planning board say about it? I mean, inevitably, you're going to give some level of guidance to people because it's just a part of
All
day-to-day
the time.
business, and
All
there's
the time.
nothing we can really do about
Oh,
that.
and,
Yeah.
and I don't think this is meant to change the things that are coming before us. It's
Yeah.
not meant to change that. The only thing that I think, based on our discussions, this is meant to change is that when we have a discussion item that we're already going to put on, and we know if Royal Crest had come to us with that discussion, and they before they came to us with discussion items, there was talk with the town, there were TRC meetings, there was meetings with select board members. There was a lot that went on behind the scenes. That's fine. We're not changing that. But when they said, hey, it's time for us to come and educate the planning board, well, maybe at that point we decide, hey, should the public be more officially brought in?
But weren't they, for Royal Crest, I thought we did a great job on Royal Crest, letting people know what was going on.
We did, but it depended on when. Remember, we did it for a year.
Yeah, we did it for years.
Right.
That's my point. We did it for a
More.
long time.
We did, right. So,
We're
but,
definitely
We didn't
for it.
notice abutters, though.
no, right. So did we do it at 3 months or at 6 months or 9 months, or was it just based on the size of it that it happened, So, I mean, again, there's not a perfect solution. I just don't want to do nothing just because what we're doing is difficult or because it's not perfect.
And John, help me understand if you can.
Kelly, got it, sorry.
So Ita, I was just, Ita, you said something very similar when you first started talking about this. I think it's so important that we listen to the feedback that we're getting about people aren't aware of the discussion items in the meetings, and anything that we can do to move this along to make sure that there is more transparency. More transparency is never bad. right? We've got to communicate this, and I get that this might not be perfect, and we might need to evolve it, but we need to do something.
And John, can you help me understand from the perspective of an applicant, hearing from John that, they may not come or it may go underground. I'm asking myself, what is it that they want to talk to us about informally that they're afraid or worried about having an abutter in the room? I understand it's a change. It would be a change, and that's often perceived as difficult, but what are they worried about?
I think it's an issue of frankness. I think it's the same way, we do certain things in executive session. There's certain things the government does in private, and sometimes you can be a lot franker with people in private than you are in public.
It's the Constitutional Convention that was purposely in secret, so they could get business done. But I view this as not that example.
That's fair.
Well, because they're already coming to us in a public meeting.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so I agree with you, John. I still think there are places for someone to go to Gene and talk, and we forgot about Chris. Sorry, we'll go back to you. Sorry. There are definitely still places for people to go and talk with. They talk with Gene or talk with departments or figure out if this is something that's appropriate to even come to the planning board, which they do now. It's just a question of that.
Well, in some cases, they want some direction very informally before they spend any money on engineering.
Sure.
And
Fine.
if and I think they want to do it,
I think it was, to me, I got the sense that it was more about, one, about cost, and two, about when you have the public hearings, especially with the abutters, it can be more hostile, and I think they're looking for a friendlier environment to at least first make their pitch.
Yep.
So that they can get feedback, so that when they come back, I think they feel like they'll be in a better position to present it to the neighbors, because sometimes it's a rough job.
I think that's a very good
what I
point,
think
but I
they're
also
coming from.
think that
I'm not saying
we-
I agree with it.
Right,
but,
but I also think that we have an obligation, and I think our last two chairs have been very good at this, to talk to the public, whether it's informal or a public hearing, about what this is about and what the ground rules are. And I think you two, as chairs, I think have shown that over many, many years. So I get that people may be a little worried about it, but I think the track record is that you've done a great job of facilitating civil engagement.
I agree. I think we can do it. I think we'd have to set kind of different parameters at that and explain what this is and what it's not. This is not a public hearing. This is an informal discussion. It's meant to educate the board. We've brought people in because we want them to hear and listen, and we may solicit feedback, we may not, but it's more about listening at this point than participating, which is different. Which is different, and that might be one of the concerns council raises, is that it's, people may not understand that it's different, which I think that would be our obligation to explain. But Chris, more comments based on our discussion.
We have good discussions.
Yes.
Very good. So these kind of introductory project discussions that I guess have been taking place, I don't know exactly how best they would be referred to, but kind of putting that aside for a moment, I do wonder whether, given what you're looking to do, if one possibility is after these discussions have taken place, and a project proponent is now at a stage when they are ready to move forward with the formal public hearing and the notice to abutters, if in that notice, any prior project discussions are highlighted so that abutters not only get notice of the meeting, but they also at that time get notice of these meetings that have taken place, and that they can hear the types of discussions and the types of proposals, and however a project may have evolved over a period of time prior to coming to a meeting. So if it's something
Wouldn't that
that,
be infuriating to an abutter with a well-intended notice saying, hey, we're about to start public meetings, and oh, by the way, we've been meeting for 6 months, and here's a summary of what we've been meeting about, and we didn't tell you. I mean, wouldn't
Well,
that be worse?
yeah, I think at some point, though, there are these, legal requirements in terms of when the abutter gets notice, and I'm sure there are some boards where maybe they don't have these types of pre-discussions. So in other words, somebody comes in with their application, they find out when they're going to be on, they find out when the public hearing is going to be, they send out their abutter notices, and, if there's an expert to be had or anything like that, they settle up with the board.
As far as
But-
I know, this is unique to our board. I mean, the select board allows a little bit of public comment. They put things on, but it is pretty unique, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I
I
wonder
don't believe the
about,
Conservation Commission entertains informal discussions.
I don't
either.
think, and ZBA certainly doesn't.
yeah, and so, part of, and it's good to have an opportunity to sit and to listen to the board, so that I can go back and kind of think about it myself and do a bit more research and also likely speak to Jean as well. But that was an idea that if these discussions are taking place, and part of the idea is to not have members of the public coming in sort of cold to this issue, letting them know specifically what meetings this matter might have been previously discussed, should they want to watch and catch up. That's potentially one way of doing it. On the
If you're going to
issue,
do that in arrears, couldn't you also do it in advance? That, you're saying in arrears, we could say, hey, we had these meetings, 6 months, here's the
Right.
dates, you can go
Yeah.
watch the video. If we're saying that might be a good idea, why would it be a bad idea to tell them in advance?
well, the way I would look at it is that these discussions have already taken place, and when the abutters are being given their official notice, which is under the statute, that all you're really doing is saying, by the way, this other material is out there. What's being proposed, I see is very different, because what's being proposed, again, opens the door to, what is a significant project. And what I was going to say also with respect to the issue of, say, transparency, is that, as I note in here, even though obviously the board is completely committed to transparency, in fact, these efforts are growing out of an effort to be more transparent. But by having, say, one member of the board make a determination, not in a public session, but on behalf of the entire board, is not, a transparent process.
So I was wondering if part of the issue here is that the determination on whether or not to notice for an informal meeting is being made by one person, the chair, and does that exceed the authority of a chair? Is that remedied by having the board say, hey, Jean could say, we got a potential applicant, they want to have an informal discussion, and then the board makes a vote on whether or not we deem this to potentially be significant, and Jean, go ahead, we'll have the discussion, but we need to notice.
Right. So to that point, I think, having it go before an entire board would cure that aspect. I think what would happen, potentially, is as it comes before the board, then you start getting into, I understand your point that you would raise, like, you sort of know it when you see it, the sort of Supreme Court test for another subject.
Yeah.
But, reasonable minds differ, and you could have some members of the board saying, I don't see it as a significant project, and others finding that it is. That in and of itself, I suppose, isn't a problem that boards disagree. Boards do that all the time. What's uncomfortable about it is on what basis are individual members making that determination. You'd need some sort of criteria, which to me leads to the question of, what about the public hearing itself, I suppose, is somehow not sufficient, given that you could continue the public hearing if need be, from members of the
Oh,
public.
but these are all before actual public hearing. Go ahead, Sean.
So not to kind of go back a little bit, but like, going back to the point of the select board doesn't really have discussion items, conservation doesn't have discussion items, ZBA doesn't have discussion items. Do we just paint ourselves on an island effectively? Like, I feel like that we're on an island, we're the only ones that have discussion items. And I guess the question lies if there's a,
Well, we already have that anyway, right? So we
no,
do-
I know that, yeah. But I guess the question lies is that, like, what if there's a scenario that we don't have any sort of project that we're gonna have a discussion, like, we don't have informal discussions, like, everything just moves to just an application, right? Which normal notice and things like that. I mean, I feel like net in terms of the time that we're doing our diligence plus public comment and moderation, you get the notice period, and between, if it's gonna be if like, our residence time right now in projects between informal to a formal meeting is, let's say, on the order of 6 to 9 months, right? And if we just say we're gonna have just a formal open meeting with everyone gets notice and still 9 months, net's about the same amount of time on a project, right? And everyone gets notice anyway.
Well, but
Right.
the issue is, so, the only thing that comes before us for discussion items are when
Yeah.
people want to come before us for discussion items. So we don't force anybody to.
No, I know, yeah,
Right, so the timelines aren't changing.
yeah.
So I don't think the timeline's not changing for anything. I don't think the timeline would change. If someone wanted to come before the board for an informal, they'd go to Gene and say, hey, we'd like to come before the board. And then what we do now is we just put it on the agenda.
Yeah,
And then we have as many informal meetings as we think is necessary, or as they want to do, until it goes to a public hearing. So for Second and Main, was there one or was there two?
2, I believe.
There were two, I think, informals. For Avalon and for Royal Crest, there were months of informals
sure.
before we actually got to an actual hearing, and with plenty of involvement on
Yeah.
those. So I don't think the timelines change for anybody. It's really an issue of one, do we think it's important enough to do these to have people notified when we're discussing a really significant project before it comes to a hearing? Because they could still just go to a hearing if they wanted to.
Sure, yeah.
And I agree, John. I think we don't want to
I-
discourage them from coming or from applying, but
Well, I mean, if we
I'm not sure
use
it's gonna happen.
Second and Main as an example, I mean, Peter, your point of, being there open with the people, I think what the people sort of want is they want not just listen to it, they want to be able to speak at the informal thing and say, we don't like this. And that, I think at some point, that becomes a non-starter for a developer. They're just, they don't have to do it. The reason why they're coming to the planning board is they want to make sure they don't totally misjudge the direction of the planning board and propose something that's way off the mark. And that's why they're doing it, because they don't want to invest a lot of money and find out that we hate it. It's good practice to do
Yeah.
that. And if you think about it, even in the zoning law, the whole notion of a preliminary subdivision plan is intended to do that. That is a formal way of doing that. We just don't have a similar mechanism for site plan review or special permits.
But isn't but like Royal Crest, right? We had months and months of informal with lots of comments, and they knew
Yeah.
they were going to get mostly bad, some good, and we went through that process, which was basically a public hearing process. And I
Yeah, it
think
was. I mean, effectively
Right.
it was,
Yeah.
but they knew that. But in some cases, I think a developer does not want to have a ton of engagement in advance with, with the public.
So wouldn't they
before
just
the
file
public
up for a hearing then? I mean,
Well, they want to get sense out from the planning board that they're going in the right direction.
So, John, I can appreciate what you're describing. It's helpful to me. Sure, it gives a better sense of, hey, we're just going to have a quiet discussion, see if we're sort of on the right wavelength here. But there's another benefit to the board and the developer of that process. And that benefit is you have additional weeks and months to process before you get to the public hearing. And so when you get to the public hearing, you've had the luxury of time
Yeah.
just to think about it. Whereas what we're doing now is, we notice at the public hearing, and then the public, I'm thinking of Main Street and, you know, the very close abutters where there is no, the property line is the side of the house practically, and the church. And part of the angst is there's a sense of so little time to get their head around it. Now, maybe I'm being just super naive here, but I do think that luxury of time to process in your own mind that the applicant benefits from, that we benefit from during that informal period, we're not giving that benefit to the public. And at the same time, I recognize your point about, you know, it could be disruptive. And that's where, you know, sorry, the chair, and, you know, I'll nominate you to be chair next time, hopefully if I'm still here, because you're doing a great job, has the job of maintaining order and explaining. And you both have done a great job of that. So quite frankly, yes, it's a challenge, and you've been up to it.
I mean, what's to prevent it from having a discussion from Gene to just let a few abutters know there's going to be a discussion?
So I've made that suggestion in the past,
Yeah.
and I think we've done that, say, hey, maybe you should talk to the abutters, because it's gonna feel a whole lot better when you come in here. And inevitably, someone comes in and says, well, they didn't come talk to, we called this person, no, they didn't.
Yeah.
We called this person, no, we didn't. If we did it, or if we have some notification list or something like that, it cures some of that, because I just don't trust it. Or we told you, we suggested do it, and then you didn't do it. I don't know, that dynamic feels awkward to me.
Yeah.
It's more along the lines of, okay, we're having to, I mean, remember, our agendas are published.
Right?
Yep.
But it's only 4 days before the meeting.
And granted, you know, you have to be a real hound to
Right.
read all, but my
Who goes
point,
and looks?
no, I know that, but my point is, it is published.
Shall I move a little
But
closer?
what's to prevent Gene from, okay, this is gonna be in this neighborhood, from just sending a note to a handful of people who live in that neighborhood, hey, tell your friends, we're having a discussion on this tonight. I mean,
No, I think we could, but I think we should decide which ones to do it for. It's not
Yeah.
everything.
well, of course not.
Right. Well, that's what we're talking about.
But if you do stuff on your own, you have a lot of discretion. I mean,
No, I don't think that's, I don't think that's
But
fair
again,
to
we're
Gene.
back to the word arbitrary, because
Right.
tonight's 189 Willow Street, if they had come in for an informal discussion, and all you hear about, there's a lot of wetlands, we know that, and we want to get before conservation and get their sense too, and like, would I have noticed the abutter that spoke tonight? Probably
Right.
not.
No,
right?
and I would, just
so
just
that's the
that one, I
problem.
would not
Yeah,
have found to
that's
be
true.
significant enough. Now, it's significant to that guy,
That's for sure.
but not enough to, I say, but again, so this is a public hearing for him, and he did get that, you know.
And I'll give
but-
a little caveat.
Yeah.
So I probably would have, because I know him, I know his history.
But
He's
you-
become
that's
before
luckily,
for
yeah.
zoning changes
oh,
numerous
I know
times.
very well.
Yeah, trying to develop his land right across from McGregor's fence, where they've joined in bylaw amendments to try to get their land developable. So I may have, but the next planner?
So-
Would they know any
No,
of that
would they?
history?
Right.
Yeah.
So let's take that one as an example now, right?
Yep.
189 Willow Street. Now it's come for a public hearing now, but before, say you come in and say, hey, I want to build this kind of thing. I want to do this. There's some history. I want to come in and talk to you about it.
Yeah, actually, maybe since that is something that might be coming before you, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's a good idea to use that as an example.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. But
Yeah.
fair enough. Okay. So let's take the ones. I mean, the one we did today, Dale Street, request for a watershed special permit waiver, right? Something like that. Anything that's a watershed special permit waiver,
So
mostly.
that came in as a building permit application.
Yeah.
Where it goes to me for review.
Yeah.
I determine it needs a special permit technically.
Yeah.
But I consult with them. I tell them what would be advantageous for them to provide me.
Right.
And then I have a sense of the board and say, let's try for a waiver first. You have another one on your next agenda next Tuesday.
So it's
'Cause
not something that we never notice those, right?
We never noticed
There's
those.
no legal requirement to notice them.
Nope. And
I can't think of a
there's a bylaw
situation.
provision that states if the planning board determines this, this, and this, they can grant a waiver. But that's all like John said, that's all consultation with me and having a sense of the
Right,
board.
fine with that.
and I think, and exactly, and I think that would continue, even though a neighbor may later on say, hey, I wish I had known about that. But we
It's a
can't do it for
matter-
everything.
It's a matter of degree.
Correct.
Thus, that Supreme Court standard at the end of the day is probably going to have to be helpful.
I mean, I think we can, I think to town council's point, I don't know that we can go all the way enough to make it objective, but I think we can add some criteria of things along the lines of, significant impact on town infrastructure or
Multiple,
traffic or even things from special permits. I think there's some language we could pull.
I mean, what's the difference between Dale Street and Main Street projects? Pretty big.
Yeah. Well, what about,
Size and location.
Yeah.
And- right, especially location.
Size,
of-
location, impacts.
Right.
Broad impacts.
Right.
But we know that. but
Right.
We're being advised, we should make an effort to describe what we know to be the difference.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think we can do that. I think the issues we have are, should we do notification at all?
Yep.
If we do notification, what type should it be, either on the applicant? And the way we have it drafted now, it's not like a full abutters, it's not a full, like, you have to send out certified or anything like that, it's just you have to show proof that you mailed it. So it's not as expensive as the full public hearing, but so, something like that, something where we just advise them and recommend it, where it's voluntary, or something where the town does it. And I'd have to know if we have a budget or if we're allowed to kind of do that.
I worry about, workload.
Right, so definitely a concern, but those are the kind of the options. And then how do we specifically, do we define it? Do we add definitions? I kind of like the idea, based on council's suggestion, of more objective criteria, that maybe we try to cobble something
think-
together.
I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear the comment. What were you worried about?
That it's
Someone
not
agreed?
objective enough. I mean, I still think, if we went down our list, we would agree on almost everyone.
Yeah.
But if we're gonna try to put something together, not only that we would agree about, but that the public would understand, I think we can put together something that says this is going to have a significant impact on the town and potentially could have impact on traffic, town utilities, town services,
And-
Parking.
the things that are generally under the special permit criteria, that if it could have an impact on multiple of these categories, then we should consider it.
And
And
the-
maybe we should come for a vote, maybe
Yeah.
not. I mean, I don't like to waste that 2 weeks, but if it's necessary, it's
And
necessary.
the most I've heard of on like kind of the hot button, I didn't get notice on, is anything that's mixed use seems to be something like people are definitely want to be more involved.
Well, if it's residential, they don't really care about the actual commercial uses.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the multifamily residential
yeah,
is
yeah.
definitely a hot button
Yep,
issue.
hot button
And
issue.
especially depending on
Yeah.
where it is,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
The ones that we've talked about, I don't remember, if, things on Berry Street when it was a 40B or whatever, but I don't remember when it's out that far, anybody really
Yeah, I mean,
caring too much. But
over
it's,
time, where you're gonna run into the rub is where some sort of commercial or high-density residential abuts single-family residential. That's
Yeah.
inevitably where you're gonna have the pressure. But the other thing is, like, back in the building boom in the late 80s and early 90s, butters to subdivisions were crazed the same way. I mean, it's like, oh my God, you're gonna build in my field. I mean, in some way you have to tell the people, no, you don't own it. You have no choice in the matter. We'll follow our rules and you'll have to trust us.
Height also could
Yeah,
be one
sure.
of the
Yeah.
things.
Okay, yeah.
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 Going to put in an 18-story apartment building, it'll be great. That was a joke.
You'll love it.
That was a joke.
Bowling alley at the end of Main Street.
Yeah.
There you go.
I kind of like it.
So-
Good one.
With residential on top, of course. Okay, so should we,
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question? So, in the event that what the board kind of endeavors to do is to create some list of criteria and bring this before the board. The thing that I wonder about is, at a certain point, as a practical matter, if a, project, Acme comes in, and there's a determination based on criteria that this is a significant project that will trigger the planning board's informal hearing or pre-hearing, however it's.
Well, it doesn't require based on our rules, it wouldn't require discussion, but if you're gonna come for a discussion, then there has to be some sort of notice. So that's what it is. We're never gonna require someone come for a discussion. It's just, if you want to come for a discussion,
And you're
and
deemed.
you're significant,
And you're
and
deemed
significant,
significant.
then you have to notice. That's the only thing. If you wanna come for a
Okay.
discussion and it's not
So-
significant, come for a discussion. If you don't wanna come, don't come. That's fine too.
Okay, so say that, then that gets triggered for that particular project. That process, how is it going to be substantively different from the public hearing?
How is the discussion different?
Well, how would the proceeding be substantively different ultimately from just having a public hearing on the matter? I mean, I understand.
It's not, so generally our practice has been that it hasn't been significantly different. Generally at these discussion items, we let people talk, we let them ask questions through the chair.
Yep.
They've generally been the same, other than we haven't required kind of the same amount of detail from the
The
applicant.
information required.
Right, so
certainly.
the difference is the information required from the applicant. And also so basically, as we've had these discussions, the applicant can bring in whatever information they want. They come, they present to us. Anyone who's here, we've generally allowed, even though they don't have to, we tell them, listen, we're gonna allow you to ask me questions, and we may tell you that that's gonna come later on, right? Sometimes the applicant says, we're gonna do stormwater next week, and we're gonna do traffic the week after, so I'll tell people, okay, that's a good question, save that, we're gonna hold on to that, or we've held questions and made lists of questions. It's been different each time, but the material and the public discourse is basically the same. We've generally treated it as a public hearing, but we've required less of the applicant.
It's
And
conceptual level,
And I
pretty
think
much,
that's,
and the cost in creating those
Yes.
conceptual levels is much less than a formal filing.
so that's a big advantage to the applicant, is they
Right.
don't have to spend a lot of money to be fully prepared, because it's just an informal discussion, and we're not going to insist on a fully baked plan. But to me, that approach only reinforces, okay, if that's the case, let's make sure that we've told people that, hey, if you're interested in this, we're starting to talk about it.
And the
So
other
could I
thing,
ask another question?
sure, but let me finish the
Sure.
answer. The only other thing is, when we do get to the public hearing, I make sure not to incorporate the discussions that we've had before, and I say, okay, I know we've talked about this before, we've had a bunches of hearings, you have to, anything you want on the record, you have to introduce and put on the record, and people have to put it on the record if they want it as part of the formal public hearing, just for any appeals processes and things like that. So even though we know about it, and everyone knows we know about it, I still make sure that when it's a public hearing, we go through those processes, and that everything has to actually be introduced as part of the public hearing.
So, a question I have, I guess, is, in the event that an applicant came forward and requested the informal hearing before the board, and I don't know the answer yet in terms of, say, reviewing it and fully vetting it, but I'm just curious as to whether, in that type of a case, whether there could be a rule whereby, the planning board, which obviously is a board that has greater flexibility than other land use boards, we offer this informal hearing, and it's defined. It's intended to maybe introduce a project, provide an applicant an opportunity to present their project plans without the plans perhaps being fully developed, whatever, however that gets defined by the board. However, in that case, any applicant that that wished to come before the board and avail themselves of this informal hearing prior to the actual public hearing would then be required, the board would give them an opportunity to do that, but they would be required to somehow or another notify abutters.
So distinguishing an informal hearing from your just basic discussion item. Because I don't want to lose our regular discussion items, our run-of-the-mill waiver requests and our, we had someone want to talk to us about
Right.
a driveway, the triple driveway that we talked about, or about do I need to get a land disturbance permit? I still want people to come in
Right.
with those things, but could we have a separate process for a very specific type of informal hearing? Gene?
Are you literally calling it a hearing as opposed to a meeting?
Well, I don't know what we'll call it. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
what
wouldn't
we
call it a hearing. That
No,
wouldn't be
yeah,
my
I don't know what
recommendation.
we would call it, but.
Public meeting?
No, because this is a meeting, it would have to be something else. Okay. But distinguish, I mean, if there was a way to distinguish those items and let them choose, but I guess the problem is, I think then someone would just choose a discussion, I just want to have a discussion, and then we'll just get back into what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we ought to be careful about over-engineering this.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
I mean, I like
you
the
know, not
idea,
having
but
I mean, obviously, one of the things we haven't even talked about is one of the areas where this is going to happen virtually all the time is if anyone wants to make any kind of significant zoning change, they're not going to even begin to go forward unless they talk to us informally first.
Right.
So, I mean, that's
And
probably one of the most common things. But
And that's
again,
also one of the trickier ones, because is it
it
just?
is one of the trickier ones, but I mean, the point ends up being is, we are, like it or not, we're balancing transparency to the public with frankness in our feedback, and we have to be careful we maintain the right balance there.
I think, see, I don't necessarily think that we're balancing frankness, because I think we're perfectly frank with whoever is here and whoever is not. I think it's more balancing the ability to succinctly get things accomplished. And because sometimes it's quicker and easier not to go through additional steps. And sometimes we don't need it. So, okay, so what should we do next? What do people want to do next? Do we want to try to reconfigure, keep going and try to reconfigure our rules based on this discussion, try to shore up some of the objectivity? Do we want to get more, do we want to let council give us more feedback? How do we want to go
I like
next
the
steps?
former.
So maybe I can work on something,
But
And-
not over-engineering it,
yeah.
to John's point, or yours, whoever made
No,
that
John's,
point,
yeah.
but some criteria to give people an idea, what do we mean by this?
Okay, so maybe some refinement
Yeah.
we can
And
present.
we threw out some.
Yeah.
We have them.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we refine it, maybe depending on how well it looks in the process, we can give it to council to look at, or we can bring it back to the board and say, hey, is this kind of what we were talking about? Since our next meeting's in a week, so maybe let's see where we're at in a week and go from there. But I seem to get the sense that we want to move forward and at least try to put forward something.
Well, is that true, John?
Well, for the majority of the
Yeah, the
board.
majority, I mean.
It's okay that we don't all have to agree
No,
exactly. I
I'm
know it is.
not- I understand exactly what everybody's trying to do, and I think it's a good faith thing, and I think that, even from my perspective, this has been very helpful to me, is that, how do you make it appear to the citizenry that you're being open and honest and completely transparent as you reasonably can, and that's fair, and that you don't have a confirmation bias. I think that's what I'm taking away from this, that I maybe didn't fully appreciate before.
Okay,
Yeah.
So do you want to carry this to the May 2nd agenda?
yes. And if we, hopefully we have time to look at it between other things, but yeah, let's carry it for now.
And I think another way to look at this is, in pursuing openness and transparency, we do not want to eliminate the informal meetings, because we think they're very valuable.
Right.
We're trying to not eliminate them.
Okay.
Because just going straight public hearing for everything would, I think, be the worst outcome.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think the worst, if we decide not to go forward with these at this time or something like that, then so be it. But if we can come up with something that we like, then great. I think that's my preference. But I don't want to, I think the way we do things now is different than other boards, and I think that's a good thing. I think these kind of discussions, I mean, I don't watch too many other meetings. I don't have the time, but I don't see that these things happen. And I think it's, one, based on the nature of the people on the board, which I think is great, but also our board is both adjudicatory as well as coming up with, items, as well as crafting policy. So not a lot of boards have those, all those dynamics. So it was a good discussion. Thank you, everyone. Can we get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 4th?
So moved.
Get a second? John, want a second? Kelly, want to second that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Kelly?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Aye.
Peter votes yes. Okay, can we get a
John,
motion?
you abstained?
Yes. 3-0. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
You want to adjourn? You're here for that, right? All right, Kelly,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
John,
Yes.
I vote yes. Next meeting, May 2nd.
May
Thank you.
2nd.
Thank you, Chris.
Good night.
I,